Hashtag Galactic soldiers laughed at Earth's wilderness. Then, faced as snipers aim hashtag Part 1 Commander Zeth, 9 stood on the bridge of the massive Karivan battleship, watching the blue-green planet grow larger on the main display. Earth, the third planet from a yellow star in what these primitive humans call the Sol System. His mandibles clicked in amusement as he reviewed the intelligence reports. Sir, his second-in-command, Captain Vex 4, approached with a data pad. The preliminary scans are complete. The humans have scattered military installations across their continents, but nothing that poses a real threat to our forces. Zeth, 9, took the pad, his 6 eyes scanning the information quickly. The Karivan Empire had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Each species they encountered seemed to think they were special, that their home world would be different. Earth would be no exception. What about their wilderness areas? Zeth, 9 asked, noting large green patches on the planetary map. These vast forests and mountain ranges? Vex 4's antennae twitched with humor. Empty lands, sir. Our bioscanners show scattered animal life, but no military significance. The humans appear to have abandoned most of their planet's surface for crowded cities, typical of a developing species. The bridge crew erupted in chittering laughter. The Karivans were desert dwellers by nature, having evolved on a harsh world of sand and stone. The idea of vast green spaces seemed wasteful and primitive to them. On their homeworld, every grain of sand had strategic value. Deploy the standard occupation force, Zeth, 9 commanded. 10,000 troops should be more than sufficient. Have them focus on the population centers. Once we control their cities, the rest will surrender quickly. As the first wave of Karivan dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, Zeth, 9 felt confident this would be another routine conquest. The humans had crude chemical rockets and primitive kinetic weapons. Their largest cities held millions, making them easy targets for mass surrender operations. The first landing sites were chosen strategically: New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow. Major population centers where human governments could be quickly subdued. The Karivan soldiers, each standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous armor plating and plasma weapons, expected the usual pattern of shock, fear, and rapid capitulation. In New York, the landing was textbook perfect. The massive Karivan transport ships settled in Central Park, crushing trees beneath their weight. Citizens fled in panic as soldiers in powered armor poured out, securing the surrounding blocks within minutes. But something felt wrong to Sergeant Crix, 7, as he led his squad through the empty streets. Intelligence had predicted millions of humans in this area, yet they found only scattered groups fleeing toward the outskirts of the city. Where was everyone? Sir, one of his soldiers reported, we're receiving similar reports from all landing sites. Lower population numbers than expected. Many humans appear to have evacuated to rural areas. Crix 7's confidence wavered slightly. Rural areas meant the vast green spaces they had dismissed as strategically worthless. But surely scattered humans hiding in forests posed no real threat to an advanced military force. Meanwhile, 60 miles north of New York City, former Marine sniper Jake Morrison crouched in a deer blind he had built high in an old oak tree. Through his scope, he watched the alien ships descending like falling stars. His weathered hand steady on his custom hunting rifle, Jake had been preparing for this moment ever since the first alien broadcasts reached Earth 3 days ago. Jake was not alone. Across the Appalachian Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the vast forests of Canada, and Siberia, the jungles of South America, and Africa, humans were disappearing into the wilderness their alien invaders had dismissed as worthless. Military units, hunting clubs, survivalists, park rangers, indigenous peoples who had never lost their connection to the land, they all melted away from the cities like water, finding cracks in stone. City dwellers who had never camped before found themselves guided by neighbors who hunted every season, learning to move quietly through forests that had stood for centuries. The governments had planned for this. While diplomats made public statements about peaceful negotiations, Special Forces units were already moving equipment into national parks and wilderness areas. Weapons caches, communication equipment, medical supplies, all hidden in places the aliens would never think to look. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, former Army Ranger, stood in a camouflage command post deep in Yellowstone National Park. Around her, Screens showed reports from similar installations across North America. The aliens had taken the cities, just as expected, but they had also walked into the largest trap in human history. "Ma'am," a communications specialist reported, "we're receiving confirmation from all wilderness sectors. Australian outback reports ready. Siberian forest teams are in position. Amazon jungle units confirm supply drops received." Sarah smiled grimly. The aliens had studied human cities and military bases, but they had never bothered to learn about hunting culture. They had never experienced a species that voluntarily spent time in harsh wilderness for recreation. To the Karevans, surviving in nature was a sign of primitiveness. To humans, it was a weekend hobby. Back in the Karavan command ship, Zeth 9 reviewed the occupation reports with growing irritation. The major cities were secured, but casualty reports were completely wrong. Instead of the expected 40 million humans in New York alone, they had found fewer than 2 million. Similar discrepancies appeared in every major population center. "Where are the missing humans?" he demanded. "Scattered throughout the wilderness areas, sir," Vex replied nervously. "Our long-range scanners show small groups throughout the forests and mountains, but they appear to be just refugees fleeing our advance." "How many?" "Approximately 200 million humans have disappeared into areas our initial surveys marked as uninhabitable, sir." Zeth 9's mandibles ground together in frustration. 200 million humans was not a small number, even for a primitive species. But they were scattered across vast areas of wilderness. How dangerous could hungry, frightened refugees really be? As night fell across Earth, Jake Morrison settled into his hunting blind for what he knew would be a long campaign. His radio crackled softly with reports from other hidden positions throughout the forest. Hundreds of hunters and former soldiers had positioned themselves along the routes the aliens would have to use to search the wilderness areas. The Karevans had superior technology, better weapons, and energy shields. But Jake had something they didn't understand. He knew every trail, every ridge, every hidden valley in 50 square miles of forest. He had been hunting these mountains since he was 12 years old. His grandfather had taught him that patience was a hunter's greatest weapon. "The woods will tell you everything you need to know," the old man had said. "You just have to be quiet enough to listen." Jake adjusted his scope and settled in to wait. The aliens would come looking for the missing humans eventually. When they did, they would learn that Earth's wilderness was anything but empty. 3 miles away, a Karavan patrol moved through the forest with growing unease. Their armor's sensors detected thousands of life forms, but their training had not prepared them for an environment where every shadow could hide an enemy, and every sound might signal danger. The trees seemed to press in around them, blocking their communications with orbit. Strange animal calls echoed through the darkness. Private Nix 3 had fought on 7 different worlds, but he had never felt so exposed while wearing full battle armor. Behind them, unseen and unheard, human observers noted their position and quietly passed the information through networks the aliens didn't even know existed. The force was waking up, and it was angry. #Galactic Soldier Story. Part 2, the first shot came at dawn, echoing through the Adirondack Mountains like thunder. Private Nix 3 was checking his plasma rifle charge when his head simply vanished in a spray of green blood. His body stood for a moment before toppling backward into the ferns. Sergeant Crix 7 spun in panic, his squad's advanced sensors showing nothing but trees and rocks. No energy signatures, no heat sources, no indication of where the shot had originated. Yet one of his soldiers was dead with surgical precision. "Contact left," he screamed into his helmet communicator, but static answered him. The dense forest canopy was interfering with their communications array. Another shot cracked through the morning air, and Trooper Zell-5's shoulder exploded, spinning him into a tree trunk. 600 yards away, Jake Morrison worked the bolt of his rifle with practiced efficiency. The .308 cartridge ejected smoothly as he chambered another round. Through his scope, he could see the aliens scrambling for cover behind fallen logs and boulders. Their armor was impressive, but Jake had been hunting big game for 40 years. He knew where to aim. The alien sergeant was shouting orders in a clicking, chittering language. Jake adjusted for wind and elevation, leading his target slightly as the creature tried to reach the wounded soldier. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, and the sergeant's weapon flew apart in sparks and twisted metal. Jake was already moving before the aliens could react. 40 years of hunting had taught him never to shoot from the same position twice. He slipped down from his blind and disappeared into the underbrush like a ghost. The surviving Karevans huddled behind cover, their advanced technology useless against an enemy they couldn't see. Their energy shields were designed to stop plasma bolts and particle beams, not primitive kinetic projectiles traveling at 3,000 feet per second. Base, this is Patrol 7. Crix, 7 tried his communicator again. We are under attack by unknown forces. Request immediate extraction. Only static answered. The humans had learned that Karivan communications relied on relay stations in orbit. Teams of ham radio operators and former military signal specialists were jamming those frequencies with everything from high-power transmitters to old radar equipment dragged out of museums. Meanwhile, 2 miles west, another Karivan patrol was learning hard lessons about Earth's wilderness. They had been following what their maps indicated was a major trail through the forest when the ground suddenly gave way beneath the lead soldier. Trooper Yex, 2 fell 12 feet into a carefully camouflaged pit lined with sharpened stakes. His armor's energy field sparked and failed as the wooden spears found gaps in the chitinous plating. Above him, his squad mates stared in shock at a trap that used no technology more advanced than carved wood and rope. The pit was just the beginning. As the surviving soldiers tried to help their wounded comrade, the forest erupted around them. Massive logs swung down from the trees on hidden cables, ancient deadfall traps triggered by tripwires created from fishing line. Former Eagle Scout Tommy Rodriguez watched from a concealed position as the aliens struggled against traps he had learned to build in summer camp. At 19, Tommy had never served in the military, but he had spent every summer since age 8 in these woods. He knew them better than his own backyard. The Karivan soldiers were trying to cut their trapped comrade free when Tommy's signal brought the real attack. A dozen hunters and outdoorsmen opened fire from concealed positions, their camouflage forms invisible against the forest floor. Hunting rifles, shotguns loaded with slugs, even an old Civil War musket fired by a Revolutionary War reenactor. Every shot found its mark. The aliens' energy shields flared and failed under the sustained barrage of solid projectiles. Their plasma weapons were devastating against energy-based attacks, but the humans were using technology the Karevans had forgotten existed. Gunpowder and lead, simple chemistry that worked the same way it had for centuries. Back on the command ship, Commander Zeth, 9 stared at the tactical display with growing alarm. Red dots indicated lost contact with patrol units across every wilderness area on the planet. In just 6 hours, he had lost contact with over 300 soldiers. How many human military units are operating in these wilderness areas? He demanded. Unknown, sir, Captain Vex replied nervously. Our intelligence focused on organized military installations. These appear to be irregular forces using primitive weapons and tactics. Primitive? Zeth 9's mandibles clicked angrily. They have eliminated 300 of our soldiers in one morning. Sir, respectfully, the weapons they are using are chemically propelled projectiles. Our scientists classified such technology as obsolete millennia ago. No civilized species would use such crude. Then explain why it is working. Zeth 9 slammed his armored fist against the command console. Double the patrol strength. Send out units of 20 soldiers each. These human primitives cannot stand against superior numbers. But the humans were not standing against superior numbers. They were disappearing and reappearing like spirits, striking when the odds favored them and vanishing when they didn't. This was not the kind of warfare the Karivan Empire understood. In the forests of Montana, retired Marine Corps Colonel Marcus Webb crouched beside a creek, studying tracks in the mud. 5 alien soldiers had passed this way an hour ago, heading upstream toward the hidden cache of supplies his team had established. Marcus had fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, but this was different. There, the enemy had been human, thinking in patterns he could understand. These aliens moved like they expected resistance to come from prepared positions, from bunkers and trenches and established defensive lines. They had no concept of an enemy that melted into the landscape itself. His radio crackled softly. 3 clicks then, too. The aliens were walking into the killing ground his team had prepared. Marcus smiled grimly and gave the response signal. 1 click. The Carivan patrol was following the creek when the first Claymore mine detonated. 700 steel balls traveling at 4,000 feet per second shredded the lead soldiers like a meat grinder. The survivors dove for cover as rifle fire erupted from 3 directions. But there was no cover. Marcus and his team had chosen this spot specifically because it was a natural funnel. High ridges on both sides channeled the aliens into a narrow valley with no escape routes. What had looked like an easy path through the wilderness had become a killing ground. The surviving aliens tried to return fire, their plasma weapons carving glowing scars in tree trunks. But the humans were fighting from positions they had prepared over days, using every natural advantage the terrain provided. In 15 minutes, it was over. 5 dead aliens lay beside the creek, their advanced armor smoking. The humans had already disappeared back into the forest, leaving nothing but empty shell casings and the smell of gunpowder. Miles away, Sarah Mitchell reviewed reports from similar engagements across North America. The aliens were learning, but slowly. They were beginning to send larger patrols, but larger groups moved more slowly and made more noise. They were easier to track and harder to supply. "Ma'am," her communications specialist reported, "we're getting confirmed kills from every sector. Colorado Rockies reports 16 aliens down. Appalachian sector has confirmed kills on 2 full patrols. The Canadians are reporting successful ambushes from British Columbia to Quebec." Sarah studied the tactical map. The aliens held every major city on Earth, but they were bleeding soldiers every time they ventured into the countryside. More importantly, they were learning to fear the wilderness areas they had initially dismissed. "What about our casualties?" she asked. "Surprisingly light, ma'am. 12 confirmed killed in action across all sectors. 43 wounded. The aliens appear to be unfamiliar with asymmetric warfare tactics." Sarah nodded. The humans were fighting the kind of war they had perfected over centuries of conflict. Hit and run, ambush and fade, use the terrain as a weapon. Every trick learned in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and a dozen other conflicts was being employed against an enemy that had never faced anything like it. The aliens had expected to fight armies. Instead, they were facing a population that included millions of hunters, hikers, campers, and outdoor enthusiasts. People who knew how to live in the wilderness, how to move quietly, how to remain hidden. As night fell across Earth again, Jake Morrison sat by a small, smokeless fire deep in a hidden valley. Around him, other members of his informal unit cleaned their weapons and shared rations. A retired park ranger, 2 hunting guides, a survival instructor, and a high school kid who had been camping with his scout troop when the invasion began. They had killed 8 aliens in 2 days and suffered no casualties. The enemy's superior technology meant nothing in a forest where they could not see, could not communicate effectively, and had no idea where the next attack would come from. Jake looked up at the stars, wondering if the aliens had ever learned the simple truth every human hunter knew. In the wilderness, the land itself chose the victor, and Earth had made its choice. #Galactic Soldier Story. Part 3. The war was entering its 3rd week when Commander Zeth 9 received the intelligence report that changed everything. His chief analyst, science officer Thex Prime, approached the command chair with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we have completed our study of human military casualties from the past 2 weeks of operations." Finally, Zeth 9 clicked his mandibles. "How many of their military forces have we eliminated?" Thex Prime's antennae drooped. "Sir, based on weapons recovered and tactical analysis, we estimate that less than 30% of the humans engaging our forces have formal military training." The bridge fell silent. Zeth 9's 6 eyes focused on the analyst with laser intensity. "Explain." "Sir, the humans attacking our patrols appear to be largely civilian hunters and recreational outdoors enthusiasts. Their weapons are predominantly civilian sporting rifles. Their tactics, while effective, lack the coordination we would expect from trained soldiers." "You are telling me," Zeth 9's voice was dangerously quiet, "that we have lost over 800 soldiers to human hobbyists?" "Yes, sir. It appears the humans engage in wilderness survival as entertainment. They call it camping and hunting. Millions of them possess these skills as recreational activities. The implications crashed over Zeth, 9 like a tsunami. The Karivan Empire had conquered 47 worlds, but they had never encountered a species that voluntarily spent time in harsh environments for fun. On every previous world, the civilians had huddled in cities while the military fought in prepared positions. How many humans possess these wilderness survival skills? Conservative estimates suggest 40 to 60 million across North America alone, sir. Similar numbers in other regions. They own an estimated 300 million firearms designed for hunting large animals. Many of these weapons are capable of penetrating our standard armor. Zeth, 9, stood abruptly, his towering form dwarfing the analyst. Are you suggesting that this entire planet's civilian population is effectively a trained guerrilla force? In wilderness environments, yes, sir. They appear to consider survival in hostile terrain a form of recreation. Meanwhile, deep in the Olympic Mountains of Washington State, the reality of that assessment was playing out in deadly fashion. A full Karivan company, 50 soldiers strong, was attempting to locate and destroy a human-supplied depot their orbital surveillance had spotted. What they found instead was Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez, retired Army Special Forces, leading a motley crew of park rangers, hunting guides, and local outdoorsmen through the kind of operation that would have impressed any military academy. Elena crouched behind a moss-covered log, watching the alien column advance through her binoculars. They were moving in standard formation, weapons ready, following proper tactical procedures. For warfare on an open battlefield. But this was not an open battlefield. This was old-growth forest where trees older than human civilization created a canopy so thick that the aliens' air support could not penetrate. Fallen logs created natural trenches and barriers. Centuries of deadfall had built a maze that only someone who knew the terrain could navigate quickly. Contact in 60 seconds, Elena whispered into her radio. Around her, 15 civilians with hunting rifles took positions they had scouted and prepared over the previous 3 days. An insurance salesman who hunted elk every fall. A software engineer who spent his weekends backpacking. A retired teacher who had been leading scout camping trips for 20 years. None of them were soldiers, but all of them knew how to be patient, how to remain invisible, how to make a shot count when it mattered. The aliens walked into the killing zone exactly as Elena had predicted. Their point man passed the concealed position where Jim, a local fishing guide, waited with his grandfather's Winchester. Their main body moved between the massive Douglas firs where Sarah, a park naturalist, had positioned herself with a borrowed hunting rifle. Elena's radio crackled once. The signal she had been waiting for. Orbital surveillance had confirmed no alien air support in the immediate area. The enemy was isolated, cut off from reinforcement, walking blind through terrain that favored the defenders. Execute, Elena whispered. The forest erupted. 15 hunting rifles opened fire simultaneously, the coordinated volley hitting the alien column like a sledgehammer. Elena had chosen her people well. Every shot was aimed, every trigger pulled deliberate. No spray and pray, no wasted ammunition. The aliens' return fire was devastating, but unfocused. Plasma bolts seared through trees, setting ancient timber ablaze, but the humans had already shifted positions. Elena had taught them the first rule of guerrilla warfare: shoot and move, never stay static. Private Yorth, 8 of the Karivan Empire, saw his squad leader's head explode from an invisible sniper's bullet and dug behind a fallen log. His armor's sensors showed heat signatures scattered throughout the forest, but when he aimed at them, his targets had already moved. A shot rang out from his left flank, and Trooper Mex screamed as a bullet found a gap between his chest plate and helmet. Another shot from a completely different direction, and Sergeant Click's 9's weapon flew apart in sparks. Yorth, 8 had fought on 7 worlds, but he had never faced an enemy that could disappear and reappear like ghosts. Every time he thought he had a target, the heat signature would vanish, only to reappear 50 meters away. How are they moving so quickly and quietly? The answer was simple. The humans weren't moving quickly. They were moving intelligently. Every position Elena's team had chosen offered multiple escape routes through terrain they knew intimately. Hidden deer trails, natural gullies, areas where the undergrowth was thick enough to conceal movement. Elena herself demonstrated this as she flowed from position to position like water, finding the path of least resistance. Her M4 carbine spoke twice, and 2 aliens dropped with precise headshots. By the time their squad mates returned fire, she was already gone, moving through a section of forest she had mapped during dozens of training exercises. The aliens began to break. Advanced military training meant nothing when every tree could hide an enemy, when every shadow might conceal death. Their formation collapsed as soldiers sought individual cover, exactly what Elena had hoped for. Scattered enemies were vulnerable enemies. Her team began to work them systematically, using hunting techniques refined over generations. Drive the prey toward prepared positions. Use the terrain to separate and isolate them. Take shots only when success was certain. In 30 minutes, it was over. 50 alien soldiers reduced to 12 demoralized survivors who finally broke and ran deeper into the forest. They would run until exhaustion forced them to stop, and then local hunting parties would finish them one by one. Elena called for extraction, and within an hour, unmarked pickup trucks driven by local volunteers arrived at a concealed logging road 3 miles away. Her entire team melted away into the civilian population, their weapons hidden in hunting cabins and barns scattered across the county. By nightfall, they would all be home with their families, just ordinary citizens going about their daily lives. The aliens would never understand that the people serving them coffee the next morning might be the same ones who had killed their comrades in the mountains. Commander Zeth, 9 reviewed the casualty reports with growing desperation. In 3 weeks, he had lost over 2,000 soldiers, not to Earth's military, which remained contained in the captured cities, but to what his intelligence analysts insisted were civilian hunting enthusiasts. Sir, Captain Vex, for approached cautiously, General Krex Prime is requesting an immediate conference with you. Zeth 9's blood ran cold. General Krex Prime commanded the 3rd Karivan battle fleet, over 10,000 vessels. If he was calling personally, it meant the losses on Earth had been noticed at the highest levels of command. The holographic image of the general materialized on the bridge, his scarred carapace marking him as a veteran of a dozen campaigns. His mandibles were set in obvious displeasure. Commander Zeth, the general's voice carried the authority of absolute power. Explain to me why a single planet with primitive technology has inflicted more casualties on your force than the last 5 worlds combined. Zeth, 9 straightened to attention. Sir, the humans have proven more resourceful than anticipated. Their civilian population possesses unexpectedly advanced wilderness survival skills. Civilian population? General Krex Prime's eyes narrowed. You are being defeated by civilians? Sir, these humans appear to treat survival in hostile terrain as recreational activity. They possess millions of projectile weapons and have scattered into wilderness areas our initial surveys indicated were strategically worthless. The general was silent for a long moment, processing this information. In the Karivan Empire, civilians lived in protected cities while soldiers fought wars. The idea of an entire population that could seamlessly transition from peaceful daily life to effective guerrilla warfare was unprecedented. You have 48 hours to resolve this situation, Commander. If you cannot pacify this planet with conventional forces, I will authorize orbital bombardment of all wilderness areas. The transmission ended, leaving Zeth, 9 alone with the terrible knowledge that he was about to commit planetary genocide to save his military career. But first, he would make one final attempt to break the human resistance. Deep in the Montana wilderness, Jake Morrison received an encrypted radio message that changed everything. Intelligence sources in the captured cities reported massive alien troop movements. They were abandoning their garrisons and moving into the wilderness in force. The aliens were finally taking the wilderness seriously, which meant the real war was about to begin. #Galactic Soldier Story. Part 4 dawn broke over the Cascade Mountains as the largest military operation in Karivan history began. Commander Zeth, 9 had committed everything. 50,000 soldiers, every piece of ground equipment, every atmospheric fighter. The entire garrison force, pulled from cities across Earth, now converged on the wilderness areas where the human resistance had proven so deadly. This ends today, Zeth, 9 declared as he watched the deployment from his command ship. No more scattered patrols. No more guerrilla ambushes. We will sweep these forests clean with overwhelming force. But Jake Morrison, watching the alien formations from his perch high in a Douglas fir, saw something the aliens missed. They were fighting the war they wanted to fight, not the war they were in. Bird dog to all stations. Jake whispered into his radio, using the hunting call signs the resistance had adopted. Main flock is in the open. Repeat, main flock is in the open. Execute Exodus protocol. Across the Pacific Northwest, thousands of humans began the most audacious military maneuver in their species' history. They disappeared. Elena Vasquez led her expanded team through hidden trails known only to local tribes and longtime residents. Behind them, alien sensors detected nothing but the heat signatures of deer and elk. The humans moved in small groups, using techniques learned from generations of hunting and woodcraft. They carried only what they needed to survive and fight. Every extra ounce had been cached in hidden supply depots prepared over the past month. They moved like their ancestors had moved, following game trails and water sources, reading the land like a book written in stone and soil. The aliens, meanwhile, advanced in massive formations designed for conventional warfare. Their heavy equipment carved visible scars through the forest. Their communications chatter filled the radio spectrum. They moved like armies had moved for millennia, expecting to find an enemy who would stand and fight. But the humans had vanished into the earth itself. Private Nex, 7 led his squad through what had been identified as a major resistance stronghold. Their sensors had detected human activity here for weeks. Weapon signatures, heat sources, communications traffic. Yet they found nothing but empty campsites and cold fire pits. Where are they? Corporal Zex, 5, clicked nervously, his plasma rifle sweeping the empty forest. Intelligence said thousands of humans were operating from this area. They probably fled when they detected our approach. Nex, 7 replied, but uncertainty crept into his voice. The abandoned camps showed no signs of hasty evacuation. Equipment was properly stored. Fires had been carefully extinguished. Waste was buried according to wilderness protocols. This looked like a planned withdrawal, not a panicked retreat. What Nex, 7 didn't understand was that he was looking at what humans called leave no trace camping. The resistance fighters had cleaned their camps the same way they always did when camping, because these weren't soldiers pretending to be civilians. They were civilians who happened to be extremely good at killing invaders. Miles ahead of the advancing aliens, Jake Morrison crouched beside Colonel Sarah Mitchell in a hidden command post that exemplified human ingenuity. Built into a natural cave system, powered by a combination of solar panels and a hand-crank generator, connected to the outside world through fiber optic cables buried years ago by a telephone company that never knew they were installing a military communications network. All units report successful withdrawal, Sarah announced, studying reports from across the continent. Estimated alien strength is 48,000 troops committed to wilderness operations. They've pulled garrison forces from every major city. Jake smiled grimly. Just like we hoped. Question is, can we make them pay for it? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Margaret Chun, a biology professor at the University of Washington, had joined the resistance not for her non-existent combat skills, but for her expertise in ecosystem management. Colonel, Dr. Chun said quietly, I think we may have been approaching this wrong. We've been thinking like soldiers, trying to kill as many of them as possible. But there's another way. She pulled out a tablet showing topographical maps overlaid with weather data and animal migration patterns. Look at their deployment. They're spread across millions of acres of wilderness, following our old camps and supply routes. But those routes were chosen for human logistics, not alien. Sarah leaned forward, interested. Explain. They're using our water sources, our clearings, our trails. But we chose those based on human needs and capabilities. Aliens from a desert planet might have very different requirements. What if we're not trying to kill them all? What if we're trying to make the forest kill them for us? The plan that emerged over the next 6 hours was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of engaging the aliens directly, the humans would manipulate the environment itself to become hostile. They would turn the wilderness into a weapon more effective than any rifle. Jake Morrison found himself leading a team armed not with guns, but with chainsaws and explosives. Their mission was not to kill aliens, but to reshape the terrain they would have to traverse. A tree accidentally felled across a river at just the right point could turn a gentle stream into a raging torrent. A few well-placed charges could trigger landslides that would block passes and destroy bridges. Elena Vasquez led teams that introduced biological warfare of a sort the aliens could never expect. Human sewage and food waste deliberately placed in alien water sources. Not enough to be detected by their sensors, but more than enough to introduce Earth bacteria that alien digestive systems had never encountered. Tommy Rodriguez, the young Eagle Scout, found his wilderness survival knowledge more valuable than any military training. He led teams that systematically destroyed or contaminated every resource the aliens might use to sustain themselves in the wild. Salt licks were poisoned. Edible plants were destroyed. Natural shelters were booby-trapped with simple devices that would collapse when used. But the most devastating tactic came from the hunting community itself. Professional guides and hunters began driving the local wildlife toward the alien formations. Packs of wolves, disturbed from their territory. Herds of elk and deer, panicked by carefully placed noises. Even individual bears, made aggressive by the scent markers hunters used to attract them during hunting season. The aliens found themselves under assault by the forest itself. Troops, tried to rest, were driven from their positions by animals that had never shown fear of technology before. Water sources turned toxic. Weather patterns seemed to shift against them, as humans who had spent lifetimes reading natural signs called in accurate predictions of where storms would hit hardest. Sergeant Crix, 7, now a veteran of 4 weeks of wilderness combat, led his exhausted squad through what his map indicated was a valley that should provide shelter and fresh water. Instead, they found a swamp that reeked of decay, buzzing with insects that seemed to target the gaps in their armor. His soldiers were suffering from mysterious illnesses that their medical scanners could not identify. Earth bacteria, harmlessly introduced through contaminated water, were wreaking havoc on digestive systems that had evolved on a sterile desert world. The squad's medic had already collapsed from dehydration after 3 days of constant stomach problems. Sergeant, Private Yorth, 8 reported weekly. I'm reading human heat signatures surrounding our position. Crix, 7, checked his own sensors and felt his chitin plates contract with fear. They were surrounded by dozens of heat signatures in the trees and undergrowth. But no shots came. The humans just watched, like predators waiting for wounded prey to weaken further. Jake Morrison observed the alien squad through binoculars, noting their obvious illness and exhaustion. His team had been tracking this particular group for 2 days, not to attack them, but to guide them into increasingly difficult terrain. They're done, he radioed quietly. Recommend we let the forest finish them. It was a kind of psychological warfare the aliens couldn't comprehend. Instead of quick death in battle, they faced slow deterioration in an environment that seemed actively hostile to their presence. Every step deeper into the wilderness made survival more difficult. The breaking point came when General Crexbrime's deadline arrived. Commander Zeth, 9, stood on his bridge, staring at casualty reports that defied belief. In 48 hours, he had lost 12,000 soldiers. Not to enemy action, but to illness, accidents, environmental exposure, and what his medical officers described as ecosystem rejection syndrome. His massive army was dissolving in the forest like salt in water. Soldiers were deserting, fleeing back toward the cities on foot. Equipment was breaking down in the humid environment. Supply lines stretched beyond their limits were failing completely. Sir, Captain Vex, reported with barely controlled panic. We're receiving surrender requests from 17 different unit commanders. They're requesting immediate extraction from the wilderness areas. Zeth 9's mandibles ground together in fury and frustration. The humans had not defeated his army. They had convinced the planet itself to reject it. His soldiers were not being killed by superior weapons or tactics. They were being slowly consumed by a world they could not understand or control. In a hidden command post, Colonel Sarah Mitchell Red intercepted alien communications with grim satisfaction. The massive alien offensive was collapsing not from enemy action, but from simple attrition. The invaders were learning what every human outdoors enthusiast knew. The wilderness was not empty space to be conquered. It was a living system that responded to those who understood it and rejected those who didn't. Ma'am, Her communications specialist reported, "We're intercepting massive alien communications traffic. They appear to be requesting immediate orbital bombardment of all wilderness areas." Sarah's satisfaction turned to ice. She had expected this possibility, but hoped it would not come to pass. The aliens, faced with defeat by unconventional means, were preparing to escalate to weapons that would devastate the planet itself. The real test was about to begin.